Okay, so first of all, a little bit about what we're trying to do this evening, who I am, and what we'll be covering. So, as I said, my name is Mr. Douglas, and I am currently the East Asia champion, but previously I used to work in cybersecurity and national security for civil service, and I did that for 10 years, and in that time I've developed some background in understanding online safety. I've also done it from the other side of the fence, looking at the red team, what they call it, looking at people from the more of an attack point of view. So hopefully that explains a little bit why I've got something useful, hopefully, to talk to you about tonight. Why we think this is important? Well, I'm sure lots of you joining us this evening will be thinking about this generally with children at home. Remote learning means that children have got access to computers in probably the amount of time they've never had before. And some of that will be really well supervised. Some of it you won't be quite so confident about what's okay and what's not. And that's what we're aiming to do tonight, is to try and increase your confidence in supporting your children to be safe online. So what are we covering? I'll talk about now. Our agenda for this evening is what should you expect your child to be doing online for education. We'll do that briefly. And then we'll talk about what are the risks for your children and for you to an extent, how you can enable them to both learn and to protect them. And then finally, we're talking a little bit more about how to protect not only your child, but yourself and the rest of your family, talking more generally about internet safety. So I hope that sounds interesting and is what you're hoping to hear about tonight. I'll try and take questions as Mrs. Blake interrupts me. If you've got any questions that you think of as I'm talking but don't want to interrupt, then please do type them into the chat, and Miss Blake will either be able to answer them for you or be able to bring it up with me if needed. So on we go. So first of all, we'll talk a little bit about requirement remote learning. I'm sure some of you will have children in Key Stage 2, that's years 3 to 6, and some of you in Key Stage 1. So just briefly on Key Stage 2. So we're expecting children to complete around 4 hours of learning per day in total, and not all of that needs to be online. So although we're talking about online safety or e-safety this evening, not everything that your children are doing has to be online. And in fact, there's good reasons why a good portion of it shouldn't be online. So what do they need to be doing? Well, they should be doing fairly regular access to Microsoft Teams during the school day. So we're not looking for the children to be doing work all day and all night. And they can access Microsoft Teams, if they're not already doing it, through either the website or the mobile app is very good and includes much of the same features. And they'll also need to use some other apps. So one of those is Timescale Rockstars for about 20 minutes a day. Again, it has a mobile app. And on occasion or daily, depending on what they're doing, they may need to access Purple Mash, YouTube, BBC. So there's a variety of different learning sites that they may need to access. Now, some of this information, or in fact, all of this information was sent to you previously by Mr. Empel in emails. And I'm sure as you've joined us this evening, you're the sorts of people that read those emails. So thank you very much. But we will be sort of collating that information onto the school website under the remote learning section that we've recently created, so that you can go and find what looks normal or links to those websites as needed. So for Key Stage 1 children and reception, the learning's a little bit lighter, around 3 hours expected. Again, not all of which is online. And I should say this one actually, one of the most important things you'll be doing with your children is reading and reading books. So don't feel that time should be entirely online. The more they can read, the more they'll be able to access the online learning and the rest of their learning. So children in Key Stage 1 and early years will be needing to watch some videos, files to support those lessons, also sent to parents, and that's all coming across through Teams. Although we didn't previously show you that it's coming through Teams, it is all through your child's Teams account, which you've now got access to. And instead of Timesdale Rockstars, they've got another app that comes from the same company called Numbot. Again, there's a mobile app that's really good for that. And there'll also be lots of opportunities for them to upload photos of their work to Purple Mash so you can receive feedback. Now, that's really useful for both your child and for us, so we can see where they've got misconceptions that we can try and address, and they can be rewarded and praised for their efforts by their class teacher. Okay, so what are the main risks? Obviously, there's some words and phrases here that probably aren't appropriate for children, so it really is aimed at parents. But in no particular order, we're talking about inappropriate content, so things they shouldn't see. We're talking about cyberbullying, their privacy, grooming by adults or older children, and image sharing generally. So those are sort of generally the main risks. And I've actually spent today myself largely in the background attending an internet safety conference, and they brought up a couple of articles I thought were useful to share with you. And we're not trying here to scare you. The internet isn't all bad, but clearly there are risks to children and adults, and understanding those risks is really important to be able to reduce them. So the National Crime Agency and the Internet Watch Foundation released some information recently saying that there are around 300,000 people in the UK who were considered a threat to children. And all the 300,000 are very likely to have access to the internet. And nearly 9 million attempts in the UK in the month this was, I think this was late last year, to access abuse websites. So some nasty stuff, some nasty people out there. And there's another headline beneath, but talking about the amount of material out there is at record levels. It's always going to be at record levels because it's only ever going to increase. So it's a slightly silly headline, but just to give you an awareness, if you weren't already, of what's out there. Now, I added this slide since last week after joining the training today, and actually it might be more relevant to those of you with older children. But obviously, personal devices, when I talk about personal devices, about iPads or phones, the trend is to give them to children as their own device, younger and younger. I'm sure that for many of you, you'll only have had phones as teenagers or older even, and we obviously increasingly find in school that children in younger age groups are being given phones, and obviously that's your choice. But the things to consider with giving your child a phone or other device that's their personal device is that those devices can connect your child to anyone in the world, and there are things that you can do to reduce the risk associated with that, but unfortunately, just by giving them that device, you're effectively allowing them to connect to people to an extent. Now, many of those apps that they'll use to contact their friends are designed to be private. WhatsApp, Facebook, even that we use mainly may use more as adults. Those messages are encrypted. They're designed to reduce the possibility of somebody reading them that shouldn't. But it means that if somebody's doing something or talking to your child that you don't want to be, it's much easier for them to hide that. Obviously, things like Snapchat and other applications delete messages after reading. So it's a lot harder to monitor them for those reasons, but it's also a lot harder to monitor a small screen. When your child's got a laptop open, it's fairly easy to see if they're flicking between screens and they suddenly look sheepish. On mobile, that's a little bit harder to detect. So just a couple of things to consider. Also consider the way you treat your phone. For a good reason, you'll likely treat your phone as fairly private, and your messages aren't necessarily for your children to read. And it's likely your children will do similar and treat them in a similar way. Phone cameras are an attractive feature children clearly, and that's one of the reasons children want them. And children might not be mindful of long-term consequences, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to do for your children. But the long-term consequences of recording those apps, that actually once they've taken a photo and shared it, then it may be on the internet forever, or on somebody else's device that they've never even met or never considered they might receive the image. And it's worth noting that most abuse images that exist on the internet are actually self-generated by children. So clearly some are generated by abusive individuals, but actually the majority of images are created by children, sometimes coerced by adults or older children. So making them produce things that maybe they don't realise the consequences of or don't want to produce in the first place. But of course, it's really important, especially right now in remote learning, that children need to be able to connect with their friends. And phones do create some risks with that. And I don't for 1 minute want to say that you shouldn't let your children contact their friends, but it's just that particularly phones, but having their own personal devices they treat as their property does create some serious risks. So we're going to talk about those risks a little bit more, and particularly how to mitigate them or reduce them now. Okay. So as just a slide there, I pinched off the training I was on today, but if you want to watch this afterwards, the video, and have a look at it in more detail, it just makes clear some of the impacts that COVID's having on children. And that both parents and teachers realise that being away from school is a negative thing for a long period for a lot of children, and it does cause mental health issues, but it also makes children more vulnerable to talking to people online that maybe they shouldn't. Okay, so what are we doing at Manorside to try and support your children and keep them safe? So first off, and this is regardless of COVID, but we, particularly in our computing subject, which is taught weekly, we are teaching e-safety at the moment to all children. It's part of the lessons being set to them, particularly in years 2 to 6, and that's been part of the way we teach for a couple of years now, but specifically happens to be the main focus of our computing subject during the spring term. So we're trying to make children aware, obviously in child-friendly language, not trying to create images in their heads of bad things happening, but we're trying to make sure that they've got an awareness and an ability to keep themselves safe online by being savvy internet users. It's also part of our PSHE, or what we're more likely calling well-being now. And by making them more savvy internet users, hopefully that is the biggest thing we can do to reduce their risk, so that they are aware of the risks and what good online behaviour looks like to reduce those risks to themselves. And to support that, obviously all staff have been trained as well. So we have fairly regular e-safety training. Our next one will be just before Safer Internet Day, which happens in a couple of weeks. And that's training makes sure that staff understand the possibilities, are on the lookout for signs that children maybe are doing things that are a worry online, and can support your children through decent teaching in computing, which is harder than it sounds, because actually this isn't a well understood subject generally, so it's really important for us that teachers have the knowledge and confidence to be able to teach it. There is also a report to teacher button in purple mash, and in Teams, if they want, they can tag a teacher to call their attention. So we've been trying to encourage children to do that. If there's something that they want our attention or something they're concerned about, they can tag us. Obviously, we do try and keep an eye on what's happening in the Teams chat rooms, but clearly there are more children than teachers, and there's an awful lot of content to do, as well as the main job of teaching, assessing and planning. So what else can you do? So the biggest thing for you as parents to be able to help improve your child's safety online is to build your own knowledge about the internet. Now, I'm sure you joining this evening is because you already have some awareness and want to learn more, which is fantastic. At the end of this talk, there's some further links, and they'll be sent out by email and be available on our website shortly. But after building your knowledge, the next thing you can do is to think about chatting with your children about the internet, and try and build it up in a positive manner, because once something happens or they become concerned about something online, if they feel that you're somebody that they can talk to about it, and I know it may feel like you want your children always to be able to talk to you about anything, but the internet is something that they're forming relationships with other people through it, and for you to be involved in those relationships, they have to be confident that they can talk to you about it, and it's not going to be a discipline issue at home straight away where they've done something wrong. So talking to them about it in a positive manner, what they like and dislike, building up an understanding of what's normal for them, so that you then have more awareness of what's not normal. And then talking about what their friends do. That also, talking about what their friends do rather than what your child does, helps to avoid interrogation, so they don't feel that you're getting at them. And that indirect talking about their friends, will probably reflect what they're doing as well, to a large extent. But it'll give you that feeling about what's normal. And then talking about what you discussed this evening. So although I didn't advise this evening's for children, we are this evening talking about how they can stay safe. And actually, for you to start that conversation with them might be about, well, I went to talk to Mr. Douglas tonight and talking about the internet. What do you think about internet safety? And just starting that conversation and trying to keep it as positive as possible, but talking about how they think they can stay safe, or how you think they can stay safe, without it becoming a lecture. Obviously, that's something we try and avoid at school as well. And then explaining the worries you might have, so that your children can empathise with your position as a parent a little bit more, but avoid passing on your anxieties if you can. So trying not to create fear in them, because actually that can have negative consequences as well. So just trying to make them aware that you just want them to be careful, and you want to understand so you can keep them safe. Okay, so what else could you do? Well, I mentioned the reporting features in Purple Mesh and Teams, but actually, obviously, most of the things they'll be using or applications they'll be using to talk to their friends will also have report buttons. They won't necessarily get instant feedback, but it may start investigations within the people that run those apps, that start to close down threats before they become too serious. But make sure that they know they can come to you personally. So reporting things online or to teachers or to parents is important, and actually because they're going to be working at home mostly at the moment, and you're the only people really available to, only adults really available to, because of the nature of this lockdown, and they need to know that they can come to you when they have got something that worries them about the internet specifically. And if it's not you, then making sure that they know who the adults they can trust, which people they can speak to. Obviously, the teachers at school, we're all vetted to ensure that we're as clear of anything possible. And if they're not confident talking to you or to us or to another person you've identified for them, that they're aware of Childline. Now, there's no shame in Childline, especially not because the nature of online safety is that it's people outside your home. It's not any indictment of you if they need to contact Childline because something they've seen online. Sometimes children, especially as they get older, will be embarrassed about what's happened or what they're seeing, and sometimes that embarrassment is how abusive people are able to coerce them to do further things. So rather than them being embarrassed, not being able to talk to somebody, it's far better if they can talk to somebody outside the home rather than nobody at all. So Childline has chat and call, and I've got some further information about it at the end. But also to try and keep it as positive as possible is to make sure they know you won't blame them for the things that happen online, because it's really easy for children to get into situations that get carried away very quickly, whether it's with their peers or with older children, people they've met on online games, or with people they've never, you would hope they never get in contact with. But it's obviously they are children, and if they're dealing with people who are older or more aware, they are possibly able to take advantage of them. I'm not going to say likely, because there are lots of normal people out there. We're only talking about that small section of the population, that 300,000 we're talking about. That's we're talking about a very small portion. We're talking about 5%. So there are normal people, but they need to know that when they come across those people who aren't doing nice things, that they can come to you without being blamed. And actually, it's a really important one that I've found with children when we've had in my own classes. Where I think it starts to come up more as they get older, sort of year 5, 6, where they get into WhatsApp or Google Hangouts or whatever chat application you're using at the time, into a discussion with their friends, and they misunderstand each other. Maybe they remember, of course, their children, their use of English is not perfect at this point, and they very quickly can get into to heated discussions or arguments. So encouraging them to take a breather or step back from things once they get into something and think, oh, I'm getting angry here, that I need to step away from it. It's really important that they know that's an escape route, because it's easily sucked into your phone or into your tablet and replying, and things get worse and worse. And I'm sure many of you have experienced this as adults. I've certainly done so on Facebook once or twice, and had to delete conversations where I've got a little bit animated with people, and that's easy enough with people I've never met, but for children where they're doing this and they're talking to people they do know, and they're then going to come back into school with these discussions at some point, we really need to help them to de-escalate or stop it from becoming something that has real world consequences. So is there anything techie that can help? And I'm sure a few of you will be hoping that there's something out there that can do some of the work for you, and absolutely there is. There's parental controls available with every internet service provider or broadband company. So that's part of law in the UK now. All ISPs have to allow that or enable that on their systems. It's not compulsory though. And what that does is it blocks or filters websites or parts of websites from loading, so that they can't accidentally Google something and find something they really shouldn't see, that can cause harm to developing minds. Also blocks certain searches and results. That includes just images from Google. So even though they can search on certain things in Google Images, sometimes Google Images will have things that really children shouldn't see, and you wouldn't think would result from putting in something that sounds quite innocent, especially to a child. But those parental controls, as I said, they're not compulsory for them to be on, although for some providers they are automatically enabled. So for instance, Sky Shield, which is the name of Sky's broadband parental controls, that's automatically on. But for good reasons, many people will have disabled that, and you may have done so yourself. There's certainly something that's been on mobile phones for a while, and so people do disable them for various reasons. And myself, I've got a mobile clearly, and when I tried using the Green King website when going into the pub as a restaurant over the summer, you had to use Green King, and you couldn't access it without disabling the parental controls. So that's something that maybe it's worth considering bringing back on, particularly in your home main broadband connection. And if you want to be able to turn that back on, you're not sure how to do it, best thing to do is to Google Sky broadband controls, or whichever your broadband company controls are, or parental controls. Another thing you can do is to install antivirus, and antiviruses usually come with extra parental controls included on purchased antiviruses, as well as stopping the things getting onto your device that are nasty, that are going to steal things from your device. Having those parental controls installed on the device actually is an extra layer of filtering that can help to back up the internet service provider's own filter. If you're looking for antivirus, you can get some good free ones on your phone or your tablet, such as AVG. And if you're looking for something that's a bit better or paid for your PC or Mac, then you can get something along the lines of Norton or McAfee, are quite big ones, or Kaspersky. And then talk about how do you keep yourself safe online. So I think it's worth just taking a second in case there's any chat. Just have a quick look. Oh, welcome to the chat. It's the only chat. Okay. So if you've got any questions at this point, feel free to unmute your microphone to talk about your children's safety or ask me any questions. Okay, I shall move on. I can't see anybody about to ask questions. So that's a little bit about how to keep your child safe online. Quite a few bits of information there. As I said, the video will be available after this, and we'll post it on the website as well. But I'd like to think about how you keep yourself safe online as well, because obviously your child their safety is really important, but you're the person that's keeping them safe, and it's important to keep yourself safe as well from fraud or attacks or all sorts of other things that can happen to you online. So the most important thing, and we teach the children about this as well, is passwords and device security. Particularly, I'll start with passwords. So I'm sure lots of you will have, or all of you will have many different online accounts. I wouldn't like to try and count how many things I have, and because of that, it's really important that we have high quality passwords, so that they can't be guessed easily, so that people can't access our device that we don't want to, and so that people that are deliberately trying to hack into your online accounts find it more difficult, because actually one of the first things they will try is to try common passwords. And you can Google, how good is my password, and there are some sites out there specifically look at the quality of passwords. I don't know that the National Cybersecurity Centre release a report each year and look at the most common passwords that are seen on the internet, and you'd be surprised that password 123 and ABC 123 right up there. I'm hoping nobody here tonight's using any of those. But making sure you've got a good quality password, making sure that you don't use the same password for everything. Now, that's a really hard one to realistically achieve, and I am guilty, I'm sure many of you are as well, of using the same on a few different things. But if it's a good password, then that's great. But really the most important one is to make sure that you have different passwords spread around a little bit, so maybe you only use 2 or 3 different passwords. That just reduces the risk if one password is stolen from you. I'll talk a little bit about how they can be stolen in a second. But if you're going to keep one thing with a different password entirely, it should be your email address. Because what can happen is if you are using a password on all your websites and you've used it on a small company that you've bought something for, I've done this in the past. I've bought some DIY materials that I couldn't get from B&Q. I bought it from a really small company. And a really small company like that is far less likely to have very good security, although even big companies have clearly been caught out. And if they get hacked and they haven't got their passwords encrypted, and it has happened, many times, all of those usernames and passwords, appear to them in the clear, and they go through and they try each of the email addresses that have been used to register with the password that was used on that small company's website. And if they can get access to the email address from that password, they'll then go through resetting the passwords for all the other things they can see have been registered to that email address by what's in your inbox or your saved items. So the email address is really the most important thing for you to keep secure. So change your password for that and have that different to everything else. And if that means you have to write it down, stick the password in a drawer until you can remember it and do so. The email address really is the one to have that's different, because there are so many small companies out there with poor cybersecurity, and so when you sign up for anything, you always put your email address in, you always put a password in, and if it's the same password as the email address, when that company gets hacked, then your email is going to get hacked at some point too, and then everything you've got linked to your email too. So that's some advice to keep your email address secure. When you're obviously using your emails, you've probably heard of phishing. You probably get phishing emails all the time if your email address is not particularly new, like mine. I've had the same email address for 20 plus years since Hotmail came out. One of my old addresses, and the amount of phishing that I get through to it's quite incredible. Most of them are very obvious. I'm sure you've all had the online porn mailers, the gambling, the Nigerian princes that need money transferred, all of those old cliches with phishing. They still exist, they still go on, they're fairly easy to detect. But the point of phishing is to try and get you to click on something in that email. And it may be, and this is the more common ones now, they're trying to get you to go through to a fake version of your bank's website. It looks a lot like, or if not exactly the same, because they've literally copied the website, and then asking you to enter in details, and maybe not exactly as it should be on the normal website to try and get you to give extra details away. But once you've entered those details, the website is just a front for saving your personal details. And then it gives you an error, or then when you click next, it takes you back onto the real website so that you can't detect the difference. So phishing is something to be aware of, and to be really careful about clicking from emails to go and log in. Discount codes on Amazon, sometimes that's a similar thing. It's not Amazon. You can use if it says it's code, copy that code and use it in the website, but don't click through to the website from the email. That's a really important thing for keeping yourself safe online. And the last point there about device security. I'm sure most of you now, because phones try and force you to do it, will be using a password or a PIN or your fingerprint scan or whatever to keep your device secure. And that's really important because when you're out and about, your device has probably got many, if not all, of your your account details saved. And if you leave that phone anywhere, and you may be very good, all the time, you only need one slip up and you've lost that phone. Not only does it cost you the however much the phone cost, but all those saved passwords are sitting there for someone else to access if the phone hasn't been secured properly. So make sure you do set passwords on your phone, but I'd also suggest doing the same on your laptop, because as unlikely as burglary is, if you do get burgled and your laptop doesn't have a password, then the criminal is going to go and access your saved details just the same as if it was on your phone. And last point here about keeping yourself safe online is about social media. And I'm sure many of you will be really savvy social media users, but I know that we see plenty of people, myself when I'm looking on Facebook, plenty of my friends that post everything publicly. And that means that anybody Googling your name can see those photos, those posts, what you've said, and that can be used against you in terms of employment or other things in your life. So it's really important in terms of keeping yourself safe, to try and make sure that what you're posting is not by default public, to choose to keep things private unless you want them to go to a wider audience. Being careful that whatever you post publicly is going to be available on the internet forever, because there are companies out there that are deliberately, for records reasons or history reasons, downloading copies of the internet routinely to be able to look back over in years to come. So nothing truly ever disappears, unfortunately, online. So that's really important for you as an individual, but also as parents of our children, to make sure that you don't come to harm by those public posts that maybe you didn't mean to be public. Okay. Ooh, yeah, there we go. So, so some further information links, and we'll have these sent out. But Think You Know is a really good website for you to be able to get more information as a parent. That's from Child Exploitation Online Prevention team. That's part of the National Crime Agency. But they've got some really good content. We use their videos as well as part of our lessons, but they've also got some really good videos that's specifically aimed at parents. So although I've given you an introduction tonight, there's a similar thing to this that's on Think You Know, and there is plenty of extra information that I'd really advise if you want to do that first point I said about how to keep your child safe and build your own knowledge up. Go and have a cruise around there, sitting in a quiet moment. Have a look, have a watch some of the videos, and some of them are really well presented and will really improve your knowledge and confidence. Obviously, there's remote learning guides. We've got our how-to playlist on YouTube, and Ms. Blake and I are in the process of posting those to the website as well. And if you're concerned about technical matters, including thinking about buying devices for your children at the moment to help them with their online learning, then you've got internetmatters.org has got some of that, and there's also some free or cheap adult ed coming up in Poole, and there's a link to that again. You can click through from, and it will send out. And as mentioned, Childline is really worth making your child aware of, especially for slightly older children. But it's there as a backstop. That if there's something your child's concerned about, and they for whatever reason don't want to raise it with you because maybe they're embarrassed about it, which is, as I said, something that's abusers actively try and achieve, is to embarrass a child into not speaking to their parents, then Childline might be that last fallback to try and keep your child safe and stop something nasty from going too far before it can't be taken back. Okay, so that's what we want to talk about this evening. I'm just going to summarise briefly. Obviously, there are lots of risks out there, but there are lots of things you can do to reduce them, so you can feel a little bit more confident and keeping your child safe. The internet has got some scary people on it, and it's got some scary corners of the internet. But there's a lot of positive, and obviously remote learning at the moment means your child's effectively forced to operate online. But there's a lot you can do to reduce those threats, and if nothing else, you're keeping an eye on what they're doing on the internet. But as I said, creating a relationship with your child on the internet that they feel confident to be able to talk to you without judgment. And then building your own knowledge. So as I think I've already said a lot about that, but we've got those links to be able to help you find more out. And then we've got a discussion about the internet, so we've said as well, making sure you've got parental controls activated on your internet and antivirus. And as I said a few times, supervising your activities, but building a trusting relationship up about how they use the internet. And last but not least is to support your child complete their computing lessons. As I said, for children from years 2 to 6 at the moment, that is the focus of the computing lessons, e-safety. So make sure they're completing it, because that's another thing we're trying to do to help keep your child safe. And if the more knowledge they've got, obviously appropriate to their age, the safer they'll be able to keep themselves. That's the aim. So I hope that was useful this evening. If you have any questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself at this point and ask them. But hopefully that's given you some ideas of how to keep your child a little bit safer online.